So I'm Maggie Jones. As you will have seen from my CV in the booklet, I'm a member of the House of Lords, and I'm a shadow spokesperson for education. But actually, I'm here with my housing hat on, and I've been a housing campaigner for many, many years, and indeed that's how I first met Rod, because we were both on the board of Shelter together some time ago. But I'm here as the chair of Circle 33 Housing Association, and Circle, without getting too boring about this, is the largest partner in a group housing association called Circle. So I chair Circle 33, our partner main board is called Circle, and I also sit on the main board. And we have 63,000 properties across the UK and about 200,000 people that we provide support and social care for. We cover about 90 local authorities, and we have property in the value of about £2.5 million, and a lot of our activities are funded by grants and loans of the value of about 1.6 billion. So I guess we're about the size of a medium-sized company. Rod's makes great play of what our ownership structure is, and I always say don't go there because this is far too complicated, but our official status is that we are a registered provider of social housing. But the main thing for the purpose of today is that we're a not-for-profit organisation, and so although we have investors and the government has a great deal to say about our activities, ultimately we don't make a profit. Any money that we create is invested back into building more homes for social provision. We're on a journey, I would say, from being just a straight, if you like, enlightened landlord to a much broader social agenda. Our strapline is enhancing life chances, and we've moved away from just thinking we'll just, collect the rent and, do the maintenance, to actually having a much broader view about the interests of our tenants. We're ambitious for them. We want them to live in good quality houses. We want them to live in good quality neighbourhoods, and increasingly we spend our money not just on doing up the fabric of the properties, but actually doing whole neighbourhood developments, providing youth facilities, providing training facilities for the people that live there. For those of them that aren't working, we want them to get work, we want to help them into work, and so we have a much broader social agenda now. And we also do a great deal of work on environment and social and sustainability in the neighbourhoods. And very interesting, just as a very quick comment, it was quite interesting in the riots over the summer that we have properties going right round North London, if you like, in the area that I cover. Some of the most rundown areas, for example, an area called Holly Street in Hackney, a very big estate, which we've invested billions of pounds in. And it was interesting that although the riots took place all around Holly Street, the fact that we had invested in there with youth facilities, with new sports facilities for those people, we'd landscaped the whole area, and it wasn't touched by the riots at all, which we thought was, a great credit to the work that we'd put in there. So we do have commercial arm, but as I say, all our profits are fed back into our activities and our charitable foundation. But we're on a bit of a journey. We're on a journey, because the government, the current government, I'm not going to be party political too much, but the current government, I guess they're not going to give us a great deal more money. They've got this grand plan for affordable homes, which I've got to say is unaffordable homes for an awful lot of people. So basically they want us to jack the rents up, and charge people commercial rents, and therefore that's where they think we should get our money for doing development in the future. We're slightly resistant to that. But we are ambitious for the future, and we do think, in terms of the spectrum, that we are on the road, on a journey perhaps in a different direction from some of my colleagues on the table. We're moving from being just a social business to actually having more commercial activities, because we see that that's the only way that we're going to fund our ultimate social ambitions for our tenants. So the future, I guess, is to broaden out our commercial activities to fund what we think is really important. That's probably enough from me.
Thank you, Maggie. Now, Marco Morganti from Banca Prossima for about 4 or 5 minutes.
Thank you a lot. Thank you all. My name is Marco Morganti. I'm the CEO of a bank, of a special and normal at the same time bank in Italy, in the sense that we are just dedicated to the organizations belonging to the third sector in Italy. And this is the special thing. The normal thing is that we are a normal bank, a bank in the full sense of the term. So we have a special license, and even if we are part of a big group, the most important banking group in Italy, which is well known even here, I think, the Intesa Sanpaolo group. So the idea of serving just and in a specialized way the third sector organizations is based on two factors. The first one is the dimension of this world in Italy. They, the social enterprises in Italy, are 250,000. And inside them, 4 million people work as volunteers or as employees. This is a big dimension, but in terms of GDP, is not so important as you could expect. And this is the reason why normal banks don't care enough this big sector of economy and of citizenship. And even for a citizenship reason, Banca Prossima has been created in a moment in Italy, which is not simple under many points of view, without self-irony, without any self-irony, but a big pain, with a big pain. So a special bank is needed because the organizations, the social organizations, are special in Italy and very varied in terms of nature, under the point of view of the law, and even in terms of organization. They are lay and religious, they are big and small, they are old, ancient in some cases, and new. They work in northern Italy, where the GDP is so high and general situation is so favorable that they can grow without any limit. And they try to live and to survive in southern Italy, where all the conditions are against the growth of such an important part of society. First done services, society in itself, and self-determined people who want to be useful and to be a part of welfare and a decent level of welfare that we need to maintain, even in this moment. So, special ways to serve, a special formula to serve those organizations depend on 3 factors. And this is the reason why we consider Banca Prossima as a special bank. So the first factor is people. People working in Banca Prossima belong to social organizations as volunteers, evidently, because their work is in the bank. But in their private life, they work as volunteers in organizations. They are 320, I think, people coming from those organizations. The same organizations they serve every day. This is very important in order to reduce the distance, the cultural distance between profit and not profit. Ecco, this is the reason why ecco is in Italian. This is the reason why I feel to be at the right place today in order to explain an experience on the edge between profit and non-profit, revenues and social values. And the second is a technical element, a new way to measure the sustainability of those organizations. It implies a new way to make a rating of those organizations, and we try to have a model which is compliant with the mother bank one and with the rules, the strict rules of Basel II and Basel III. And this new way to consider the sustainability is very effective. And I can anticipate the number on which I found this convention. We have a quality of credit, a non-delinquency rate of credit, which is 0.5%, 10 times more than the Italian average for normal economy. It implies something, evidently. And the third reason of considering consider Banca Prossima as a special bank is the fund. There is a fund that we form with at least 50% of revenues of the bank. And this fund is expressly conceived in order to reduce the risk of employing money in southern Italy enterprises, in young people enterprises, in enterprises working in situation or fields not normal or weaker than the normal. This is the story of Banca Prossima, the story of its strange sustainability because of the fact, and I end with this, we are evaluating sustainability of third sector organization with good results, as I anticipated with just one number. But at the same time, we are demonstrating to our parent bank, the big normal bank, that we, as a bank, as a new bank, we are sustainable. And this year, after a story of 4 years, is the first one when we can say, hey, mom, no hands. We are self-sustainable from this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Fred Turok from LA Fitness and 8 other things.
I have 2 passions, employment for young people who don't have jobs, commonly called NEETs, not in employment, education, or training, and health through physical activity. So I suppose I'm here today, first of all, because I'm an entrepreneur and set up LA Fitness, quite simply to I suppose, give my children some inheritance. So very clear, selfish motivation. And my second, I suppose, area as to why I'm here, I'm also a social entrepreneur in setting up TAG, which I suppose has been spending my children's inheritance before they can get their hands on it. And so I've invested and set up TAG, and TAG raised of private investment and government funding, 11.7 million pounds, and in 3 years we've put 1,800 young NEETs into employment. So it's been very successful. And then the third thing is my health credentials with physical activity. I chair physical activity on behalf of the Responsibility Deal for the coalition government. And there, quite simply, I'm looking to bring business and charities and social enterprises together in order to ensure that our children continue to get free National Health Service, and that we ensure that we drive social entrepreneurs to develop business models that ensure that we get healthy and fit and don't have the current crisis of obesity and inactivity that we currently have. So I suppose those are my 3 areas.
Great, thank you. Now I'm going to ease myself over to the space that Ian Cheshire left, and we'll have a conversation. So join me over here. Thank you. Yeah. And we'll have plenty of time also for you to ask questions. But just very quickly, I'd like to cut across the panel and say, are you a charity? Are you a social business? Are you a social enterprise? Maggie, for Circle 33.
Oh, well, I suppose...
Or something else.
you see, this is something that I find quite intriguing about Rod's perspective, because to me it doesn't matter. What matters is the outcome, and the definition doesn't really matter. But I would say that we are a social business in the sense that we are driven completely by the social needs and meeting of social needs. So if we have to somehow fund that by some commercial activities, we do so. But actually, because we receive some money, or quite a lot of money, from government grants and so on, I think we're very much in the kind of safe territory of being close to a charity, but having some commercial activities.
Okay. Fred, would you describe LA Fitness as a social business, a social enterprise, a charity, or a business?
A business.
But you could say, couldn't you, that you're making Britain fitter and that there's a positive externality you generate. So are you not a social business?
I mean, listen, I think probably the motivation of the founder, myself, was money, to be very clear. The fact is that I was originally a PE teacher in a comprehensive school in Brixton for 7 years, so I happened to build up a desire to help people to get healthy and fit, and then there was just some crazy streak in me which said take the family house and remortgage it, so we then owed 120,000 instead of 60, and buy a gym. So, you know, yes, that wasn't why I set it up. Does it now do good? Yes, we have 13 million visits a year, about 1.1 million a month of people coming through our doors, taking exercise. And what we do know from statistics is that the cost of servicing a person who does no exercise in the GP surgery is £18 on average for every visit. And we know that 80 pence is spent on prevention through getting people healthy and fit. So the return on investment, you could argue that LA is making a substantial investment by basically getting people to exercise ready and stop them claiming from the NHS.
Okay, thank you. And Marco, how about you? Is Banca I know Italy's special. Everybody always says Italy's different. But is it, even within the Italian context, is it a charity, a social business, a social enterprise, a business? What is it?
It's a normal banking organization. And, but since we work on social enterprises that are weak in classic sense, in classic banking sense, we have to add something, and I tried to explain the main points, to be more effective. This is the formula of Banca Prossima, being more effective thanks to a renounce of a part of the profits by our shareholder. This is the idea of Banca Prossima. Normal bank with special means and special tools and with a low profit conception. And
what do you mean a low profit conception?
Low profit because of the fact that our shareholder could have the double of the profits if we didn't have that fund, that special fund that they allow us to form.
Let's talk about that a little bit, and I'm going to ask all the panelists this question as well. Let's talk about how you actually make that trade-off. So is it kind of, or is there a formula where you say, well, this is where we're trading off this amount of profit for this amount of social impact? I'm going to ask all the panelists, but let's pick it up with you, Marco, because you've just mentioned this fund.
For us, the solution I explained is forced by things. We haven't chosen the idea of being less profitable for our shareholders. But since we have fixed as the aim of the bank to create social value through the social organizations, we have to be more effective in giving credit to them. The only way we know is to create that fund. And that fund, to be effective, it has to be at least 50%. It is a technical calculation, not a sort of sacrifice quantification in terms of being greedy towards our shareholders.
Fred, I mean, so again, you were very clear earlier on that LA Fitness was just a business. Now you're growing a bit softer, I guess, as chairman, or more multifaceted in your outlook. I mean, do you actually make these trade-offs consciously and with a formula, or how do you think about them now at board meetings, et cetera?
Well, I think, I mean, from an LA perspective, as it happens, and you won't be surprised, LA was the partner that TAG chose to roll out when we first ran our pilot, and subsequently has taken something like 60 or 70 of the young, neat people and given them jobs up to and including the awards event that I attended early this year, where the Young Employer of the Year happened to be a young neat black from Brixton area who had actually come up through the system. So that was, pretty nice. But I think LA looks at its social investment in a very limited way. It is about shareholder investment. However, I think that, and it's just slightly a side point, if I may, I attended the breakfast meeting this morning, and I have to say it was like attending a meeting being spoken to in Swahili. I didn't understand it. I find the language that many people talk around this whole social enterprise, I don't understand it. I know I'm dyslexic and South African and an entrepreneur, but I would encourage you to get your language right, because I actually believe, and many people may disagree with this, I actually believe that if you can actually define quite clearly what it is you are and what it is you're trying to achieve and what the return is that you're trying to achieve, whether that's a commercial return for a bank or whether it's a social return, I think there's a long way to go in getting the language right.
Oh, I'm glad you made that point. Many views on that, I'm sure, in the audience. Maggie, how do you all make these trade-offs at Circle 33? Are they precise, or are they less so?
Yeah. Well, I think we're much more clearly driven by the social purpose that we have. That's memorandum of understanding and the agreement that we have with government and so on. I think where the whole sector, the social housing sector, is changing now is that it used to be acceptable to just work at that very simple level of providing rents and maintenance. And now there's a great deal of pressure on us to sweat our assets, so to speak. I said earlier that we've got 2.6 billion worth of properties. So actually, we need to go out onto the market to make sure that we maximise the return that we can get to create extra money from that asset, if you like, so that we can actually build new properties for social rent. So the onus is, so we're very clear, and this goes back to the whole thing about language, we're very, very clear about our ultimate goal, which is to provide the maximum number of social properties that we possibly can, because there's a housing need out there. But in order to do that, we have to have a commercial arm that maximises what we have, which is a very, very extensive portfolio of properties.
Intriguing. So as Fred is softening, you're hardening.
Absolutely, yes,
okay.
yes. And in fact, the regulator does raise several eyebrows at our financial model, which I understand is slightly out of kilter with a number of our comparator housing associations. But we haven't gone bust yet.
That's comforting. We're going to turn to the audience in a second. I'll just ask one more question, but so you can prepare your questions. But now I'd like you to shift into your roles more as individuals than as representatives of corporate entities. So this social thing, social business, social enterprise, social investment, social economy, conference attendance is way up, lots of articles being written on it, all sorts of things, but, pet rocks were once big, and Furbies, Furbies? Yeah, Furbies. I mean, do you think this is a fad? And if so, please say so. And if not, please say why you think it's not. We'll start with you, Maggie.
Well, I
Be
think
honest.
yeah, and it does follow on from what Ian was saying earlier. I don't think it's a fad, and I think this is just part of a growing. Perhaps it's because we're, a successful kind of. Perhaps the UK's got the luxury, if you like, because we're a relatively successful economy, that we can start to broaden our aims a little bit more. And if we were a new developing country, perhaps we wouldn't have that luxury. But it does seem to me that, as Ian was saying, that the next generation of people that are coming forward don't just want to be driven by that pure commercial approach, and they don't find it don't find it very life enhancing to work in that environment. So I think people are on a journey, and I think an awful lot of people feel much more comfortable working in an organisation that has strong corporate social responsibility, broadening that out to the kind of third sector and the John Lewis and the co-op models and so on. So I do think that's probably the way that we're going, and I think that's all a good thing. And the ultimate challenge to us, of course, is to prove that those models are more successful and more profitable than doing things in the old-fashioned way. And I suppose we've still got to prove that case.
Indeed. Fred, same question?
Yes, I mean, I've just quickly scribbled here to try and articulate a description of the sort of social enterprise thing. And I've put it down as two things. The first one is it's a way of doing business for people who may feel that they don't have either the balls or the capability to be an entrepreneur and set up a hard-nosed, profit-making business. I'm just saying it to be a bit challenging. And secondly, whether it's actually a way of people who, under normal circumstances, have a big social heart, but actually would like to make some money, as well as having a big social heart, so setting up a social enterprise. So whilst it may be a bit controversial what I say, I think it goes back to what I said in language, which is quite simply, be clear as to why you're doing it. Everybody wants to have a house and a car and a nicer car, but some people may not want to be a millionaire, or they may want to, but just don't feel that they've got sufficient energy or desire or capability to do it. So I think social enterprise actually fills a very nice void, which is do-gooding charity which cannot survive in the current environment because there just isn't millions of pounds from government that is going to prop up effectively a true charity where you get paid regardless of what the outcomes are. And on the other side, as I said, using entrepreneurs to actually grow social businesses.
Marco.
I think that for those reasons, social enterprise could be considered in itself as something more solid and more able to avoid the default than a normal enterprise. And we have some evidences of this, evidently in our statistics in Italy. We know that each year, every year, the number and the average of social enterprises that default is lower than the for-profits that default. This is a fact. And at the same time, the banking system continue considering, included Intesa San Paolo, and this is the reason why Banca Prossima has been created, continue to consider those enterprises as weaker. Is evidently the opposite of the reality, but this is something of Italian bipolarity that I can't understand, I can't explain. But I am very involved in this field, and the idea of Banca Prossima started with this first discovering, and continues with the everyday experiences that demonstrate that the future of third sector can be times and times more important and more important for the community and more sustainable in itself in the future. And there are many demonstrations of this. If I can give an example, I come from Florence, and Florence is a city less wealthy than Milan. Milan is one of the most wealthy cities in Europe. And the third sector is well developed in Milan, more than in Florence. And the normal grade of wealth is incomparable higher in Milan than in Florence. But despite that, every poor people in Florence can be assisted by volunteers of the Misericordia that start in 13th century, doing the same service to poor people who are ill at home. They go there and they do the mutatura. Mutatura is an old Italian word to say that they take this person out of the bed and help her or him to have a little walk around the bed, and then they change the clothes to that person. Milan. Milan, these days, my wife, I'm a CEO of a bank, I'm a banker, and my wife is a notary public. So we are wealthy people, evidently. But my wife broken his foot yesterday, and no one make the same service to an extremely rich person. It implies something. It implies a big space to grow for similar enterprises in northern Italy. This is the situation, the scenario where we are working in order to create social value. Imagine what we can do.
Thank you. Questions from the audience? We have about a half hour. This gentleman in the back on my left.
Hi guys, I'm Jamie Dunn, MD of Made by Young People. My question is going to be directed to you, Fred. As a teenager, as a business owner, and as a former member of the NEET category, what do you think the current gap is in education that's not providing the actual skills and that young people need to go out and actually find work or even self-employment?
Well, that's a big question, but to try and summarize, the education system is failing approximately 20% of our young people. Those young people leave school without qualifications, disaffected, and don't have the necessary soft skills, employability skills to do anything. As a result of that, they turn, worst case scenario, to drugs, violence, gangs, crime, etc. And slightly better than that is sleeping in every day and staying at mum and dad's and watching TV all day. So that's what they end up doing. Hence, we have 1 million young people not in employment, educational training. Therefore, what's the solution? Solution is that business has to go into schools early. It has to engage with those identified that will fail from the system, because we know who they are when we probably knew with you when you were 12, 13, 14 that it just wasn't going to work for you. So we need to engage with you. We need to provide you with work experience, apprenticeships, pre-apprenticeships, soft skills training, etc., giving you citizenship skills so that by the time you leave school, and this is where I love the apprenticeship scheme, you actually have the opportunity to move into an apprenticeship, a different career path, than feeling a failure because you didn't go to university and come out with 3 A stars in A levels. In summary, that's what needs to be done.
Thank you. Right at the back. I should put on my glasses.
Hello, I'm Pat Fitzsimmons. I'm from a charity and a social enterprise. We have the social enterprise mark called Community Network. What we do is we sell telephone conferencing and then we link up isolated people. But I want to make a comment about primarily what Fred was saying. I object to LA Fitness being called a social business because then Tesco is. Tesco sells healthy food. You know, any business is a social business then, really. And, you know, the defense industry protects us. And I think Fred is absolutely right in terms of we need good terminology, which is why I have got the social enterprise mark, because I need something that says to people, just the way a registered charity mark says, someone's looked at us, someone's looked at our books, someone's looked at our aims, and they say, okay, you can be called a charity. And I think it's probably different with Circle 33 because you're a registered social landlord. Again, someone has looked at you. What I object to is going to lots of social enterprise dues like this, and I'm sorry, everybody looks like a private business to me. I cannot see the social anywhere. And that's what I find very difficult. We put our social up front and center.
Okay, thank you. So Fred obviously looks like the kind of guy who can probably defend himself. But let me just say that he didn't actually say he was a social business. Fred said he was just a business. I was trying to probe him and say, but aren't you a social business? And he actually parried that. Yeah.
Hi there, my name is Fleur Haynes, and I suppose I'm an ex-entrepreneur, now become investor. I wanted to take the conversation slightly more macro and just talk about the ability to have impact. And this is great because you both, or all three of you, represent 3 very different case studies for how to become successful in terms of making impact. You have someone who comes from a more charity type background and institution that now, because of certain failures in the system, might have to become commercial. Then you have a hard commercial person who's, you know, made his money and therefore can give back. And then you have a hybrid model. Now, in sort of business school terms, the hybrid model has so far shown to have the less high chance of success. But that's not actually my question. My question is, for the next generation and for, say, your children, having seen what you've seen, having done what you've done, how would you do it if you had to do it all over again? Would you choose the same road, or would you actually go about it differently?
Thank you. And maybe a corollary to that would be, what would they advise their children or godchildren to do? If you could pass the mic to that gentleman, and then we'll take both those questions, and then we'll take another round of questions.
Thank you. Paul Harrods. I live in Bristol. In the last 12 months, we've seen a number of emergency food banks opening. We've seen far greater demand for rough sleeping provision, for emergency shelters, youth clubs being closed down, and again, sort of emergency provision happening. But very few social enterprises starting up, actually. I'm just wondering whether, given the kind of cumulative impact of the spending cuts and the recession, whether actually we're going to see a far greater demand for just real basic charity provision, and maybe social enterprise will take a bit of a back seat until the economy recovers again.
Great. So I don't know who wants to start. There's two questions, really. The first, Fleur's question, is really about the next generation. What would you advise your kids? Would you advise your kids to get into this? How would you do it differently if you were starting now? Anybody want to start with that? Marco?
Next generation. The answer is maybe in the facts. We can see in Italy that social enterprise and the third sector in itself are full of young people, cultured, and female. This is a composition, the opposite to the classic Italian one. The classic Italian one is old, male, and not so cultured. And no, this is a fact. This is a fact. I'm an exception because I am a female. But finally, this is something very important. And in addition to that, many organizations work in the education of young people, and this makes me confident in the future, even for my two daughters. And starting, for example, starting as volunteers in social organizations like Food to Poor People, for example, is a good way to try to become tomorrow entrepreneurs. Maybe your experience is the same, but in Italy it's not so evident in itself, not so automatic. We have to start to work in order to make more automatic this transformation. The experience of being voluntary, and which has to be enforced and made more normal, and the transformation of this experience in the entrepreneur's one. Anybody else want to take that, or should we?
No, just quickly. Again, I see these things fairly black and white, I'm afraid. I think that it's about jobs, and it's about investment money. And money, city people, banks, big, large organizations have to decide what they want to achieve and for whom. We can see what the banking crisis has done. We're now seeing Italy and Greece and all those problems. We have a major problem in terms of the way banks invest and the way society was controlled and still largely is controlled by banks. So I think the first part is that banks and fund managers and the people they represent have to decide what proportion of their money is going to be spent doing what. And the second element is that if people don't have jobs, they're going to riot. I mean, you know, with respect, voluntary, doing things voluntarily is fine, as long as you've got something to put food on the table for your children and your husband or your wife or whatever. So we've got to focus on jobs. So it's about creating sustainable employment. And again, I repeat what I said earlier. I think that the exciting part of social entrepreneurs is that you will create jobs and you will deliver a cause. So we can't just rely on volunteers forever, because as unemployment goes up, we have to provide them jobs.
Fred, that'll give us a great lead-in for later this afternoon when we have an announcement to make. Maggie.
Well, actually, Fred said some of the things that I was going to say, which is, I suppose, the advice to the next generation is not to hold the city in awe. And I think actually that the previous government, as well as the current government, have just been too timid at actually challenging some of those vested interests and just very, very bad practice. And I would say that the previous government should have regulated the city. They should have opened their eyes, seen what was happening, and bitten the bullet and regulated the city a lot sooner than we're now beginning even to think about, although I don't think the current government have got the balls to actually do it. So really, the future has to be about doing things, about making things, about people having apprenticeships, about real income generation, and not just about fancy figures on a screen in the city office. So I hope that the next generation will have learnt that lesson.
They may have the balls, but they're in a bit of a vice grip. The second question, and I want to let's try to answer them a bit more quickly. Paul said, "Come on, there are no social enterprises getting started up now. These are bad times. Isn't it just time for charity?" Let's start with you, Maggie. Yes or no?
Well, yes, that would be lovely. I mean, I've got a background in housing homelessness and so on, and it's true that the money is drying up. The government grants are drying up. The charitable income is drying up. It's a real crisis out there, and I don't see where the help is really going to come from. So we need more help from you out there to generate some social enterprises in that area.
My response is that's why we need entrepreneurs, people who don't take no for an answer, people who say, I tell you what, Coots, I'm coming to your front door tomorrow and I'm not going away until you've seen me because I have something that can give you some return, which is better than no return, and many banks have struggled terribly in terms of getting returns for shareholders. Just look at their share prices. So I can actually help you, which is, I think, what's happened with your bank. So you may not get an IRR of, 50%, but you will get a 5 to 10% return on an annual basis, which is what happens with the banks you use. So I think we need entrepreneurs who step up to the plate, take, as we're talking balls, take things by the balls and say, I am going to go and lobby where the money is, and you've obviously got to have passion, you've got to have a business idea, and just set it up with a social cause basis. But go and get the money from the people who have it and set up your businesses.
So it's not charity, Paul, it's going to be social enterprise. Some other questions. This gentleman there, this woman here, and I can't see, I should put my glasses back on. This person there in the kind of reddish, maroonish, brownish thing.
Hello there. Good morning. My name is Brian Smith from Barnsley in South Yorkshire, which is a bit of an economic backwater. I'm getting a bit lost in all the theory here. And can I suggest we get back to some basics? And the basics for me is if third sector and social enterprise organisations have a viable and sustainable business plan, which has clear objectives setting out how they are developing and helping within their community, is there not a need to cut through some of the theory and address the issue of how do you marry up such organisations with those who have the money to invest?
Thank you.
Because what I've heard so far is a lot of theory that when you're working at the grassroots, you've got to get back to basics.
Absolutely. And that was the theme of our conference, I think, last year or 2 years ago. Just down here in the front. And then can we get a mic over to that person there? Great. No, we'll do you in the next round, sir.
My name is Katie Hill, working with Clearly So. Question for you, Fred. I wanted to ask whether TAG could have effectively been created and could continue to exist and survive if it were not for LA Fitness's involvement, and what are the implications of that if it was crucial to its success?
Okay. Thank you. And you? Yes? Stand up?
Yes. My name's Hugo Sparks from River Simple. We're a hydrogen car company. And I'd just like to challenge the basic premise of the session, that a trade-off is unavoidable. Most businesses rely on the goodwill and commitment of a number of different stakeholder groups. And at River Simple, we've built a partnership representing 6 different stakeholder groups. And how can you expect to harness the goodwill of all those if their interests of 5 are subordinated to the interests of 1? So we've got a genuine partnership in which the fiduciary responsibility of the board is to balance and protect the value streams of all 6. And our core investors who've put a couple of £1 million in argue that one of the key reasons why they've invested is because of our corporate structure. And I'd just like to ask if you think we are not doing ourselves a bit of a disservice by accepting this stereotype of social enterprises not giving very good returns.
I love that question. So that we can be quicker, maybe if one of you can take each question. Now, Fred, Katie asked you if TAG could have happened without the money you'd made from LA Fitness.
No, wouldn't have happened. It needed a kickstart. But then equally, it wouldn't have happened from a number of people that gave up voluntary time to help. And it wouldn't have happened if employers across the fitness sector hadn't decided, well, actually, yes, it was 1,700 young people that effectively would get a 6-month job interview for, because TAG paid their salaries for 6 months as well as training, etc. So it really was a big investment, hence the amount of money we had to raise. The employers basically were no downside from our point of view. We don't have to pay anything for 6 months. At the end of 6 months, we will have interviewed them, know exactly what they're like, and we can then determine whether we want to keep them on in full-time employment or not. So I think it wouldn't have happened for a number of reasons. But in summary, I would say that it required an entrepreneur to make it happen. And entrepreneurs have this habit or capability of doing and delivering. And that's why I go back to what I said earlier. There must be entrepreneurs in the room here who can do exactly the same thing.
Oh, there definitely are. Brian, we're going to go to your question next about back to basics. This is all great theory, very Yorkshire. This is all, how do we actually make it happen? I mean, clearly so, it probably spends about half its time putting rich people in social enterprises together. BuzzBank, who are hosting one of the lunches, actually not just rich people. They spend a lot of their time on the crowdfunding model, trying to actually connect people with causes. And actually, you might want to go and visit them at lunch. You put money together with causes. Marco, maybe you could take that question on.
I have maybe an answer for the previous question about the entrepreneuriality. And I agree, we need an entrepreneur and a social entrepreneur, who is able to make a sketch of his idea and to communicate this sketch, this idea, this pitch to banks, even normal banks. This is the reason why we are considered as an open source. But it's not obvious that at least Italian entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, are able to do that. And it implies that a bank who wants to be more effective in giving credit and to sustainable organizations has to have directly or not directly another role in the plot to give consultancy to them, to be consultant of those organizations. And I think that we have to start with a double process. On a part, the banking system has to be more open to the needs of the social entrepreneurs. On the other side, social enterprises have to be more entrepreneurial. And sometimes someone asks me if I am involved in giving a social idea to economy. My answer is that the most important challenge is giving economics to social, giving an economic point of view, an economic capability of being understood. This is the idea on entrepreneuriality.
Brian, it looks like we're going to not get you an answer, but I tell you what, the person who came after you, Katie Hill, wrote a report on behalf of the City of London Corporation, which answers that from an institutional perspective. So you have the Buzz Bank answer, the high net worth answer, the institutional answer, and I'll make sure that Katie Hill gets you a PDF of that 180-page report, which will take you very much back to basics.
Can I give Brian a one-liner?
You can give Brian a one-liner.
Brian, just a one-liner. I think that you have to decide what your motivation is with the organization that you represent. If it's charitable, then remain voluntary and go and fundraise from people to help you to deliver that charitable cause. But if it is a social enterprise where you're looking to earn a living from it, to go back to what is your personal or your organization's personal motivation, then you just have to have the skill of engaging with big business stroke banks. And that is where the entrepreneurial creativity comes in. You need that chutzpah. You need that capability.
And Maggie, could you take, and I'm afraid then we're out of time, so I apologize to all of you. I know I had questions. If you want to maybe pop up and make a quick comment, maybe we can do that. But the gentleman from River Simple, challenging the basic premise that there is a trade-off. Is there really a trade-off?
Well, I thought you'd answered your own question, your own challenge to us, actually, because I agree with you. It's not necessarily about a trade-off, and I think everybody in the room would have experience of the positive features of working in partnership with stakeholders. I think at the core of all of this, you've got to be more confident. I think the social businesses have to be more confident and not regard themselves as some slightly quirky kind of fringe sector, because I think that time has passed and you are now moving into the kind of respected kind of business sector, and part of that is to have better business models, better economic plans, actually know what you're doing to make a profit where all the stakeholders can have an equal share in all of that. So stop apologizing and get out there and grab the opportunities by the reins and get on with it, and actually make money that everybody can share.
Great. We're going to end in a minute or so, but we have a minute or so, so we won't be able to answer your questions. But those of you who have something burning you want to say, pop up, say it. I'll give you 20 or 30 seconds. We'll start with you, sir, in the dark shirt. Go.
This is what we need. Get your chin up, smile. Don't take Fred's comment as off-putting. I know he's trying to fire you up. I'm firing you up. You know what? You're building a new sector. Capitalism has partly been broken. I worked in a big company for several years, and we need you. So smile, get up, get out there. There are new types of legal structures where you can combine social impact and profit. They're popping up in the U.S. You've got B corporations that are popping up, right? So Fred, we're getting our language right. We're honing it, we're refining it, and we offer the invitation to you. And this is why we're so happy you're here, to come back and continue and help us develop the language to go and change capitalism forever. I want to give everybody a round of applause here today for showing up.
Wow, aren't Americans just so optimistic? Anybody else have a quick comment they want to make? Or let me, actually, all right, on that note, which was clearly a very good note to end on, would you join me in thanking the panelists?